Hello, my name is Christopher and welcome again to Spinning Round, my vinyl channel here on YouTube. This is my second video and I'm really happy that you're here to watch, and I'm looking forward to getting your feedback and getting your insights and finding out what things you'd like to see on the channel. Obviously, I have a music channel, which you can also see here, and that's, of course, youtube.com/ChristopherClaus, and you can see my performances, but more about that later. Today, we want to talk about Revolver, released back in August of 1966, and I have a certain affinity to both this album and to Rubber Soul. With Rubber Soul, I have a connection because I was actually born on the day that it was released. Well, maybe not the day it was released, but pretty close to. I was born in 1965 on December 2nd, and the next day was the day that Rubber Soul was released in the UK. So I always kind of think that the Beatles made Rubber Soul for me, and it's sort of my birthday, gift from them, and I think that's kind of a cool thing. When I was probably in this picture, probably about 8 months old or close to it, you can see I'm lying in my crib with a Capitol Records album underneath me. Now, I don't want to say that it was Revolver. I'm sure it was another Beatles album for sure. But even back then, I had this affinity for the Beatles, even though it would be in 1973 that I would really fall in love with the band. So why is Revolver so special? Why do people revere it as such an almost perfect album? Part of the interest in Revolver lies in the fact that the Beatles' songwriting was changing from She Loves You, I Want to Hold Your Hand material to something that had a bit of a soul, that had a conscience. There was the essence of Indian music that was being introduced into the music. The idea of vari speed, changing the tape speed to give a different effect. Double tracking, of course. There's numerous things that happened during the recording of this album that advanced not only the album as an art form, but advanced songwriting in pop music. In fact, I would say that Revolver is probably Paul McCartney's greatest musical achievement in his days as a Beatle. The new remix that Giles Martin has done is really good. I've been very critical of his work in the past, and I know a lot of you know that I feel that way, and very strongly too. I was so excited when Sgt. Pepper was going to be released, the remix, the big special deluxe edition. And then when I heard it, my heart sank, especially when I turned on Being for the Benefit of Mr. Kite, and I hear that opening chord, da, 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 and I'm expecting this beautiful sonic sound, and all I can hear is compressed mush. It was overly compressed. Again, you need to understand that as they were tracking the album, they were adding compression to tape as well. So when you add all of this extra digital compression on top of that, it just became a sonic mess. The White Album, the remix on that fared better. And in fact, I think with the White Album, because it was so gritty sounding an album, the compression and the things that Giles did actually made the album sound better. And for me, I can listen to the remix of the White Album and enjoy it and have a fun listen. But then Abbey Road. It was the best recorded album that the Beatles ever did. And there were moments that were missed. Again, compression loomed its head. Mixing decisions that were questionable on the musical end of things happened in some of the mixes. Again, the album lost its character. And even though there were moments of, wow, this would have sounded really good, some of the decisions that were made had a detrimental effect on the album. My biggest issue with Abbey Road has always been I Want You, She's So Heavy. From the 2009 remaster to, of course, the remix. There's a moment where John starts to play his solo, guitar solo. And as guitar players know, you have something called a toggle switch, which changes the different pickups that you're using on a guitar. Well, before his solo, he hit the toggle switch to change positions to get a different sound for his solo. When he did that, it made a clicking sound. Well, in our perfect digital age, we can't have clicks and we can't have noise because that's unmusical. Well, for me, as a musician, a guitar player, when I hear that click, I know what's happening and I'm getting ready for that sonic difference. In the 2009 remaster and the remix, when John goes into that wonderful solo, the click is gone. And all of a sudden, the tone of his guitar changes, and it doesn't make a lot of sense. And it's been those kind of decisions in the remastering and remixing of these great albums that I sometimes question. And I wish I could be hired by Apple to be a consultant, to be honest. Then Let It Be came out, and I have to say, Let It Be was the most musical of all the remixes up until today. And I have to say, with great happiness, I am really pleased with what they did on the Revolver stereo remix. What makes these remixes so good? Well, they're not perfect, and I'm going to go into a song-by-song comparison, and we're going to do a shootout, and I'm going to tell you between the two mixes which one I prefer and why. So let's take a trip and take a look at Revolver from the original UK stereo mix to the new 2022 remix by Giles Martin. For track 1 of this album, you couldn't find a better opening track than Taxman. In fact, the Beatles had this gift of picking a wonderful opening track to start their albums. Rubber Soul had Drive My Car. Please Please Me had I Saw Her Standing There. What a way to grab your attention and draw you in. So Taxman, of course, is one of my favorites, and I love playing this song live as well with my looper. So I took a listen to both the original stereo and the 2022 remix, and this is what I found. In terms of the mixing decisions, we're going to talk about panning. When you pan an instrument in a stereo field, you can either put something far left, center, far right, or anywhere in between. So looking at Taxman, here's a couple of things that I noticed in the original mix. Obviously, the backing track, the guitars, bass, and drums were all done at once. They're in the left channel. You can hear that quite clearly. Vocals that are double-tracked, and double-tracked means they did one take, and then they either did a second take at the same time, or they would use a machine that would, what they call, use artificial double-tracking, so that it would give the impression of the signal being two different performances. The vocals were always in the center. The backing vocals were in the center. Tambourine was in the right channel, the cowbell was in the right, and the guitar solo, played by Paul McCartney, was in the right. Everything in that specific mix sounds lifeless because it's all spread out and dispersed, and there's no sense of centeredness. When you hear the mono mix, it sounds so powerful because everything is coming at you right in the center. On the 2022 remix, the bass and drums are dead center. When that happens, you get that full sense of power. And that's really how modern recordings are today. You have the bass guitar in the center track, the center panning, and then you have the drums spread over a left and right kind of thing. But the kick drum and snare are always in the center. Well, in this case, drums and bass are center, and it sounds amazing. The clarity to the bass and the drums is there. It's wonderful. The backing vocals are also in the left and right channels. They've been able to separate them and spread them out. The guitar is also in the right channel. The guitar solo that comes in, Paul's, is in the center. And the cowbell is in the left channel. So what I found here is that the song rocks harder because of the placement of those instruments. And because of the higher definition of the bass and drums that you can hear clearly, it just, to me, is the better mix. So I'd have to say the winner for Taxman would be the 2022 remix. The next track, Eleanor Rigby, one of the most beautiful songs ever written, and one of George Martin's most beautiful scores. So beautiful. There's no contest here. All of the strings in the original stereo mix are, what I believe, all in mono. They're all right in dead center. The vocals, however, are panned left and right because Paul double-tracked them. And of course, there are backing vocals as well. The chorus vocals are panned hard left and right. There's a congestion there, and you don't feel the sense of space that you could in a stereo mix. Well, the remix, the strings are finally in stereo. There's a proper staging where you get the violins in the left channel and the viola kind of to left center, and then you've got the cellos happening in the right. And it's as if you're looking straight on to a performance of a string quartet. It's all there. The double track vocals are in the center, where they should be. The chorus vocals are panned left and right, and they sound wonderful. There's such a beautiful sound here. It's slightly bright, And I'm not sure if that was an EQ issue there. I would have toned a bit down in the 1 kilohertz range, but it sounds really beautiful. It is a much more beautiful and musical mix than the original. So for me, the winner would be the 2022 remix. I'm Only Sleeping is such an amazing song. And with the effect of vari-speed, the Beatles played it at a faster tempo and a different key, and when they slowed it down, gave it that dreamy feeling. And of course, what I love most about this are the backwards guitars. I always love the sound of backwards cymbals, backwards guitars. I was expecting and really looking forward to hearing the 2022 as an improvement upon the original. However, such was not the case. I found that the snare was in the center, the drum snare. It sounded good. The ride cymbal was kind of in the left channel. The backing vocals were slightly to the left. But the bass was too heavy. It seemed out of context. And I think if there had been just a little more compression, or if they had lowered a specific lower frequency, maybe 100 hertz, just to clean it up a bit. What I liked about the 2022 remix was that the backward guitars were separated for the solo, and it sounds fantastic. But the snare sounds really thin when you compare it to the original mix. And it sounds like the vocals were de-essed. Like it just seems like all this is gone. The top end on John's voice is gone. I think the snare sounds much better on the original mix, and John's voice seems to be clearer. It seems to be clearer in the original mix. So I hate to say it, but the winner on this one is the original UK mix. Love You Too, George Harrison's second composition for Revolver, well, second in terms of the order of this album, was another exploration into Indian music and trying to take those sonic signatures from Indian music and transport it into 20th century pop music. I have to say very clearly, very simply, the new remix is hands down the winner. The opening sitar figure and the tambura are so clear. The tonality of those instruments is striking. There is a guitar track on this specific song, and you can hear it in the background. I would like it to have been a little louder in the mix, to be honest, but the stereo space that Giles gets with this mix just highlights the beauty of those instruments, and they don't sound as compressed, they don't sound as old. The 2022 is a clear winner there. Here, There, and Everywhere is another one of Paul McCartney's songwriting triumphs. It's such a beautiful song. What I found with the separation of these instruments, it allowed space in the track, which gave it a much more musical feel. The bass guitar is in the center, whereas in the original mix, it was over in the right with the drums and the guitar and kind of hidden. It is so clear and beautiful, and sonically, you just feel the bottom end of that instrument. It just sounds lovely. The vocals are slightly brighter. I'm not sure if I like that or not. The drums, again, are center, but the toms, you'll notice, are panned to the left channel to make it give you that impression that you've got stereo drums. This is one of the issues I do have with the remix. He does this, Giles, as well in Tomorrow Never Knows. And there's a part where in Tomorrow Never Knows you hear the tom hit. And I think it's cool. But the problem is the cymbal that either the right, well, in this case, the ride cymbal, it's not in the far right or the far left, wherever the cymbal would be. Normally it would be on the left. So it's kind of weird. Like the toms are stereo, but the cymbals are all dead center. So I know what they were trying to do, but it's a bit disorienting for those who've made recordings in the 20th and 21st centuries and done drums in stereo to have the cymbals in the center, but then toms on the side. You know, I'm okay with everything being in the center, but it was still pretty cool. What I loved is that the bass and the kick drum work really well together, the bass guitar and the kick drum. And there was something weird in the original UK mix where about at the minute 37 mark, there's a tape drop or something in the double track vocal. It kind of, the volume drops a bit. Well, in the new remix, whatever it was, they repaired it, and the volumes are appropriately there. It's a very musical mix. It's a better blend than the original. This is, I would say, one of my top 3 favorite remixes from the album. So the 2022 gets my vote again. Yellow Submarine, the song that John wrote for Ringo. Normally you would think, okay, this one's got to be, the new one's got to be better. I have to say my vote this time goes towards the original mix. In the stereo mix, the original, Ringo starts singing In the Town, and on the word town is when the acoustic guitar comes in. Plays a D chord, but it sounds like D flat because it's tuned down. Well, in the original mix, the guitar comes right in with Ringo at the very beginning, In the Town. So what Giles did in the stereo mix was recreated what they did in the mono. And so I don't know if it was one of those, they forgot to turn the fader on for the guitar, which they did in Sexy Sadie for the mono mix. You'll notice that the bass guitar in Sexy Sadie takes a while to come up. Listen to it. If you have the mono mix of Sexy Sadie on the White Album, take a look. The thing is, I really would have liked the effects to have been a little bit louder. They weren't as loud as the original mix. And the kick drum, there's something about the sound of the bass drum on the original that sounds amazing, and it sounds very muted in the 2022 mix. Almost like they cut off certain low frequencies and it just lost its weight. And I think in that song, like a marching band, you need that extra weight. And of course, at the end, you expect it to be this big party and the chorus vocals come in, We All Live in Yellow Submarine. It's a big party. Well, it feels a bit like a very conservative party. So I have to say the new remix is too tame. The winner for me is the original UK mix. She Said, one of my favorite John Lennon songs. I never liked the 2009 remaster of She Said. It just sounded dull. It was almost like they had put they had taken all the high end off of the final mix. It just seemed very lifeless. The original UK CD, the 87 CD, I like the sound of that particular song. Sadly, in the new remix, the guitars are cleaned up way too much. The guitars need a bit more grit, a little more compression. They need a little more boost in the mid-range to sort of stick out. You've got this beautiful sounding rhythm section on this track. I have to say the bass and drums sound great on the remix. However, the organ is not loud enough in the mix. The cymbals need definitely more top end. It just seems pretty lifeless, and it needs more volume, and they're just not there. The voices sound great, but it's just lacking weight. I don't know if you remember the remix of Meat City from John Lennon's Mind Games album back in the day, but I always found that the remix lost the harshness and the grit that the original 73 mix had. And I think it's a similar thing here, that the grit is gone in She Said, and the thing that makes the song so great is that dirtiness. So the winner for me is the original UK mix. Good Day Sunshine always sounded good. You have the piano, one piano in the left channel. You've got the drums in the left channel. There's a cymbal roll that happens in the opening, that builds up. That's in the right channel. The second piano is in the right. There is double-tracked piano in this. And then you've got the bass in the left channel. So again, the drums, probably the piano and the bass were all done together. That's my guess. You've got the backing vocals and the main vocals in the center. And the second drum kit, because there is another drum overdub, it happens in the right channel, like the Good Day Sunshine cymbal hits. That's all in the right channel. Sounds great. And the backing vocals at the end, good day sun, go back and forth. Love it. Psychedelic. Wonderful. But on the remix, the vocals are warmer. They're right in the dead center. The drums and bass guitar center again. Piano is now in the left and the right, but they have a new life to them, and they sound so clear. The second drums are in the right channel, the hits that you hear. I think it could have been, personally, I would have liked that track up maybe 1 or 2 decibels, just a little bit louder. It could have been louder. The pianos are so much clearer. It's so musical. And the cymbal hits, I think, could be louder as well. But the snare sounds fantastic. It's a musical mix. It grooves much more than the original stereo, and I love how the vocals also pan back and forth at the end when it modulates. So for me, the clear winner on this one, and thankfully so, again, this is also one of my favorite remixes, is Good Day Sunshine. It's no surprise that I love Revolver so much, because for Blue Suburban Skies, I actually did 2 different songs from the record, and I think that's significant. And the 2 that I did were the next 2 tracks. Andrew Bird Can Sing. This one, I was so hoping that the remix would be wonderful. And there's a few very good things about the remix. 1, the snare drum. Wow. Sounds incredible. Sounds so good. The vocals. I love how the vocals sound. So good. And the placement of things is good. However, I really preferred the heavily panned vocals in the original mix. I found that the guitars were a little bit brighter. I found that the guitar solos were at a good volume in the original mix. In the remix, I found that they could have been louder. This one I'm going to call a draw, because there's things I like about the 22 remix, and there's things that I love about the original. So this one is a draw. For No One. This song gets my award for my most favorite remix of the entire album. And let me tell you why. Separation, separation, separation. This one is the biggest revelation of all the tracks. When you listen to it, the harpsichord in the left channel is so clear. The piano is in the right channel, so you have this lovely stereo separation there. The horn solo that's in the left channel, oh, it's breathtaking. It sounds like Alan Civil is right there. It just sounds so good. What I found that I liked most about the remix is that the bass guitar was not as heavy or as loud. It fit more within the context of the song. And I mean, boom, boom, boom. I mean, it sets the tempo, it drives the song, but there's something about it that it fits better in this song. And there's a lot of S's, extreme S's on the original vocal of For No One in the UK mix. Well, the S's are gone. So that heavy sound on the remix, completely gone. There's no question. Best remix on the album, and clearly the winner was a 2022. Dr. Robert. That song rocks. And honestly, the new remix, it again has a greater weight. The bass sounds phenomenal. It grooves. The drums groove. The guitars are there. The vocals aren't as heavily panned as the original mix. And, the shaker I thought could have been louder on the remix. However, you've got the guitar in the left channel, the organ in the right channel. The guitars are well balanced. This rocks harder than the original. And I have to say, another top mix here. Dr. Robert gets my vote, the 2022 remix, as the winner. The 2022 remix of I Want to Tell You is also my choice as well. Surprise, surprise. The song just sounds full. The snare, again, sounds better. Again, no surprise here. The toms seem to come to life here. It rocks harder. The vocals aren't as hard panned left and right. There's a bit more in the center. The tom and the snare drum are separated to give you that impression of stereo, which again, at first I liked, but then I'm like, I'm not sure if I like this, but it's still pretty cool. And that happens at the 1:45 mark on the song. To me, there's so much there to be wowed about that the new mix is the winner. When we talk about Paul McCartney's greatness, we see it again in the Motown-inspired Got to Get You Into My Life. Because this song grooves so much, and because these remixes have really improved the bass and drums of pretty much every song here on the album, the new remix is clearly a winner. I actually said, holy when I first heard this. I couldn't believe how amazing it sounded. The drums and bass are right in the center, where before they were kind of in the left channel. The vocals are dead center, which they were in the original mix. What I like, again, at the 33-second mark, the drum fill, the snare is in the center, the snare fill, and then when Ringo goes to the tom, it shifts to the right. So again, you get that feeling of you're seeing a drum kit in front of you. Again, just ignore the cymbals and you're okay. If a remix is to bring new life and clarity to the sonic elements of a song, and that's what makes a successful remix, this one has got it. Everything here just sounds phenomenal. And especially those beautiful guitars in the end and the break. Again, they're right center, but they sound wonderful. So, wonderful. So we get to the final track, the one that was recorded first back in 1966 in April, Tomorrow Never Knows. You would think, after hearing all this, that this has got to be an amazing mix. The drums and bass sound phenomenal. And again, the separation of the snare and the tom, ding, boom, boom, we've talked about that before, that happens here. But the laughing loop, Paul McCartney did this laughing sound. It sounded like seagulls. That you know that loop. It needs to be louder. In fact, I found the majority of the loops were softer in overall volume than the original stereo mix. What I loved about the original mix was the boldness of the effects and their equalization, a little bit more mids, and their volume, a little bit more aggressive. In the remix, those effects and the panning, there's lots of panning that goes on, which I love about it. So the 2022, love the panning. That's fantastic. However, they could have been louder. If the loops had maybe the high mids just boosted slightly, it would have been my favorite mix because, again, this song needs to sound aggressive. And if you pull back on those loops, the loops are what make the song distinctively it. You know, I love the original mix, but it also does feel a little bit empty after you've heard the remix because the drums and bass sound so great on 2022. So I was torn. I was so torn. So I would say this one would be a draw. I couldn't pick between the two because there were great things about the 2022. The rhythm section sounded great. The effects sounded better on the original mix, so I gave it a draw. So when we look at all of the tracks, there were 9 remixes that I thought were better. There were 2 that I thought were draws. And then there would be 3 songs that I thought were better on the original, and that's I'm Only Sleeping, Yellow Submarine, and She Said, She Said. And to me, I think if I like 9 of the 14 tracks that were remixed, that's a success. And overall, would I add this to my collection? Yes, I would. I think sonically, it's the better sounding album of the 2 stereos overall. But again, there's some caveats, right? I have some issues with some of the tracks. For me, hands down, the mono mix of Revolver is still the one that I kind of go to and listen to. But I think with the new stereo mix, I would listen to this a little bit more. And I've been listening to it a lot in the car lately and been really enjoying it. So there you have it. Those are my comparisons on the Revolver stereo remix compared to the UK original. I hope you've enjoyed it. I hope it's been insightful. I hope I haven't bored you to tears, but that you've stayed with me. You know, I think it's up to you to decide. Check out, listen to the songs. The streaming sites have the new remix up. Have a listen for yourself and see what you think. Now, in my comparisons, I will tell you that I listened to the digital CD files and compared them to the CD files. So I did not, in my comparison, do a vinyl comparison. I am going to do that, and if I find any major changes next week, I will add an addendum video about my findings. I opened my set, as you saw for my very first video, and they sounded great. And all the records look great. There are no major flaws. I'm grateful about that. I've listened to parts of the remix album, but that's all I've listened to. And I thought what blew me away is when I compared the CD files to the vinyl, that the vinyl sounded so much better. And again, you're dealing with 24-bit versus 16. And some people say they can't hear the difference, and I can. To me, there's a depth and there's a sonic difference. And that's why everyone works in 24-bit that is making modern recordings today. So folks, thank you for joining me. I hope you enjoyed the video. I hope it was insightful. Let me know how you feel about the remixes, and do you like them more than the original stereo mix? Are you a big fan of the mono mix? Do you not like the mono mix? Do you think that the UK stereo is the way to go? Share them in the comments below. And of course, if you haven't done so already, please subscribe and like the channel. I'm looking forward to more vinyl adventures together with you. So that's me finished. This is Christopher saying records need to be played. Spin them round. We'll see you soon.